Okay, you're live.
All right. I'm here today with two TI coaches, colleagues that I value most highly. Suzanne Atkinson is an emergency room physician and TI coach in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kirsten Sass is a physician's assistant and a mother of two. And a world champion triathlete, and Kirsten is from McKenzie, Tennessee. Do I have that right, Kirsten?
You do, Terry.
Okay, and the reason we're here today is to talk about the wonderful news I got from Suzanne's Facebook page within the last 2 weeks that Kirsten was the world champion for overall age group world champion for Olympic distance triathlon, and one or both of you can explain what it means to be overall age group world champion a little bit later. So a little bit of background. I met Kirsten's dad, Volker, who's also a physician, and probably around 1992 or 93, I think, when Volker brought Kirsten's brother, Jesse, who I think was about 12 at the time, to a week-long camp I did in Chicago, and Volker and I reconnected. I read an old letter that he had sent me, again, over 20 years ago, few years ago, and then got back in touch, and shortly after that, I met Kirsten. Suzanne, I'll tell you very quickly how I met. She applied to be a TI coach. It was the most impressive coach application I'd have ever seen. We asked for an audition video. Suzanne did a really high production value video in which she critiqued herself, all of the flaws she observed in her stroke and how she would go about fixing them. And then from right after the after our coach training, I was barraged by emails from Suzanne that were great. I loved getting them, but it was really evident to me the intensive energy and passion she would bring to her coaching. So I'm really delighted. Let's without further ado, let's get into this. We'll talk a little bit later about the World Championship, but Kirsten, I want to ask you first, what attracted you to Total Immersion? I expect Volker had something to do with it, and why you became a TI coach, and then finally, after you became a TI coach, has that affected your swimming or triathlon? I mean, your experience as a coach of performance.
Well, Terry, of course, my father had a great deal of influence on my swimming, and when I started doing triathlons back in 1999, we would get in the pool and he would show me some of the drills and the total immersion things he had learned. But our biggest dream was to do a total immersion open water swim camp. So in 2013, in January, my father, my sister Robin, and I made the journey to Maho Bay, and we did the open water swim camp there. And that revolutionized my swimming. I swam, my furthest swim before that time was an Ironman, or a little bit greater than that, a 2.6 mile swim. And I swam over 7 miles in Maho at one time. And I was just amazed that I could go from swimming so little to swimming so far. And that's when I really realized how beneficial total immersion is to learning how to swim and to swim efficiently. And you know, they have the saying where you watch it, then you do it, then you teach it. And I thought, I want to be able to share this with the people that I know, the people that want to learn to swim. I would like to be able to teach them how to swim like that. And so I pursued the coaching. I went in February of that same year down to Florida, and I worked with you and Suzanne there and became certified to coach. And I think it's one of those things that does help me in my own swimming to be able to look at others and see things that they're doing correctly or that they have room for improvement on and apply that to my own swimming technique as well.
Well, we are just thrilled, and have been from the beginning, to have you as part of our community. So, would you take us through your progression from novice triathlete to world champion? And the second question, since we're here with your coach, is talk a little bit about what portion of that was self-coached and decision you made at some point to seek coaching?
Well, I did my first triathlon in 1999, and I finished dead last in my age group, but I finished. And when I did, I think every person that passed me, and there must have been about 1,000 of them, cheered me on. And there are two things I gathered from that. Number one is, what an amazing environment in sport where your competitors are cheering you on and motivating you to do better. And number two, surely I can go faster than that. So I kind of stuck with it. My father was very big into triathlons, and he was just thrilled that I had started doing them. So he helped kind of guide and coach me for the longest time. And then I coached myself. And gradually, as I stuck with it, I moved up slowly through my age group to where on a good race, I could win my age group sometimes. The decision to work with Suzanne actually came from you, Terry, because I was looking at the swim portion of my triathlons and thinking that that had the greatest room to improve, that I did not know myself what needed to be done. And actually, it was the fall before I decided to go to Maho that I reached out to Suzanne. We were never able to connect at that time, but after Maho, she was starting to work with me with my swimming, and we met at the coach training camp. And you know, she has a background in cycling and running as well. And I decided, well, you know, it might be interesting to see what she says that would be different from how I would guide my own training. So she started working with me in the full discipline of swim, bike, and run, and it has led us great places. We've had a lot of obstacles, but we've had a lot of great successes too. And the world champion is just still kind of hard to believe, quite honest.
Yeah, but it's just another step in the progression, right? I think that's the first time I've ever heard someone who has, you know, achieved what you have achieved say that their first triathlon they finished last in their age group. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about people who sort of wandered innocently into triathlon with very little expectation and ended up on the podium the first time out, but you started at the bottom, literally.
I had to work hard for everything I get.
That is fantastic. That's really inspirational. So Suzanne, now to you. You went to medical school, and as you were telling me earlier, you know, you've been working in emergency medicine for how long?
About 10 years now. This is my 10th year in practice.
Yeah, and you're not only working in, you know, as a physician, but you also train physicians, as you know, as you shared with me earlier, and as I knew, running seminars for second-year medical students at Pittsburgh Medical School. So I'm really curious how you know, what led you into coaching?
I got into coaching really at the same time I started my my full-time practice of medicine as an attending. I had always been very active in sports when I was younger, doing soccer. I was on the swim team when I was younger. I played tennis, so lots of different sports, mostly the short effort, faster technique, intensive sports. And when I graduated from college, I went to work for Outward Bound School. And at Outward Bound, I began getting into rock climbing and kayaking. And just like you mentioned with Kirsten, the progression through the ranks of triathlon, I had a progression from rock climbing to getting interested in mountaineering and the skills involved and the specific fitness involved in mountaineering. So compared to spending an afternoon climbing 30 or 50-foot rock faces, which is a few minutes of effort, you know, mountaineering involves several days, long hikes, you know, 12, 16 hours, and is very much an aerobic endurance sport with some subspecialty of skills. You need to know how to use an ice axe, how to tie your knots, how to set up a tent at altitude when the oxygen pressure is low. So as I began studying all that, I participated in some local groups, and when I was gone at residency, I became really, really passionate about helping people understand more about how the body worked, and I began teaching fitness classes for a local endurance club. And at about the same time, I had done 1 or 2 triathlons myself and hired a coach, and I realized that a lot of the things that I was studying and applying to mountaineering applied also to triathlon because they're both endurance sports. And so I talked with my coach at the time, Brett Danielson, and he thought I would make a good triathlon coach, so I just pursued it and began getting certification and continuing my education through USA Triathlon. And also on my own, I took some master's levels classes in physiology at the University of Pittsburgh. So it's all been a wonderful you know, orchestra of all these different inputs in my life to allow me to coach the way that I coach right now.
So you were a coach for quite a while before you became a TI coach. What led you into that? What were your expectations, and how have things turned out differently or whatever from what you thought TI coaching would bring to all of your coaching?
Well, I was always curious about total immersion from the time I discovered it. I discovered it while I was still doing my residency, so it was before I obtained my triathlon certification, but I had been doing triathlons on my own. I had swum competitively right up until ninth grade when I dropped out of swimming because I was just kind of tired of it, tired of getting up and jumping into the cold water and never performing very well. I liked swimming, I liked being in the water, but I didn't like competing on the team. So I discovered total immersion due to having back pain. I had a back injury and a lumbar disc resection 11 years ago now. And when I went back into the pool the first time, I had a lot of back and neck pain. And one of my attendings, we were talking, he had been doing some swimming. He introduced me to total immersion. I read the book, I watched the DVD, and before doing any drills at all, just having read the book and observed, I got in the pool. My very first length, I had zero back pain and zero neck pain. So that was my first introduction. And so for me personally, I was sold, why would I swim any other way when I couldn't swim before because it was painful, and now I have no pain. So from there, getting in the pool, it was just, forward movement in terms of adding speed and endurance. After I'd been coaching for a while, though, I would secretly hope that all of my triathletes were doing masters because I didn't feel confident writing swim workouts. I didn't know what I had to offer anyone for swimming. So I was very relieved. I would just put on their schedule, masters, 2 or 3 times a week. I finally got to the point where I'd been working really hard myself trying to get faster in swimming and hit a wall, which is in some circles embarrassingly slow swimming, but fine for an adult triathlete. And I decided to take a total immersion course for 2 reasons. Number one, I felt like there was more I could do for my own swimming. I felt like I was missing some secret or some trick, and I was confident that total immersion could help me sort through that. And number two, I wanted to know how to teach my athletes. I wanted more to offer them. So when I took my total immersion weekend workshop with Dave Cameron in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Devonna Eubanks. Yes, and Devonna Eubanks. It was just eye-opening. I expected that I already knew most of what I needed to know about swimming. I just needed to learn how to teach it, but I had no idea the things that I didn't know. So simple touches from Devonna, just shifting my arm a little bit wider, and hints from Dave about when to time the kick. It was eye-opening. Not only the swim skills, but the way TI processes swimming, the idea of mastery, the idea of incremental improvement, the idea of finding one thing to do better at the end of the practice, even if that one thing is focusing better or letting go of external distractions better. So it's really impacted my coaching, obviously, in the way that I'm able to help people learn how to swim, but just approaching anything that's technical, anything that can get extremely detail-oriented, taking a more holistic and organic approach to it, and focusing on the idea in everything that I do and everything that I try to teach my triathletes and my medical students and residents of, incremental improvement. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be the best today, but you can be a little bit better than you were yesterday or last week. Everyone's rate of improvement is going to be different, but I think as long as you're always trying to get a little bit better continuously, it's okay if you have a little bit of backsliding and falling back. If you keep coming back to it with the right intentions, you're going to continuously improve over your lifetime and career.
Thank you. I imagine Kirsten's rate of improvement has been a little bit different from some of the other athletes you coach. So would you walk us through how your coaching relationship with Kirsten has evolved from the start until now? And was there a point where you really thought she had the potential to be a national, let alone world champion?
Well, I'll start with how our coaching relationship has evolved. I think Volker initially contacted me back in 2012 based on Kirsten's timeline that she just described. They were interested in getting Kirsten some additional help for her swimming. I was actually going to travel down there to Tennessee and spend a couple days with them. And that didn't work out due to schedules, and frankly, no one had ever asked me to do that before. So I didn't really know how to respond to it or who these people were or why were they putting any faith in me without realizing that the connection through you held a lot of validity for them. So fast forward another year, they went to the open water camp and they contacted me again, or maybe Kirsten contacted me initially that time. still wanting help. And so I was thrilled to make that connection again because I felt like, possibly a missed opportunity. I was really curious who this family was and who this woman was. So initially it was just talking about swimming. And when I finally did meet Kirsten at the coaching camp, I was so thrilled because we'd already been working together for maybe 2 or 3 months at that time on just sort of triathlon training. And in any coaching relationship, I should say every coaching relationship that I've had with an athlete, there's always this break-in period of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, getting to know the athlete, them getting to know me. How do I communicate best? How do they learn best? How do how do they communicate best with me? And so we had gotten through a lot of that initial stuff by the time I met her face to face. So it was really exciting to meet her. And from then it's just evolved into really a relationship. So, when I first started coaching, I knew that there was more to it than just writing a training plan for someone. But making the personal connection with Kirsten, learning more about her, learning more about her family, traveling down to Tennessee and meeting her family, meeting her husband and her kids, has really allowed me as a coach to approach her planning in a way that works for her. She's a physician assistant as well, so there's a lot of time involved here, and everything needs to be balanced just right, or at least go through phases of rebalancing. So without Kirsten's input, letting me know what's important to her, what her work schedule is, how she's feeling, it would be inappropriate to just say, this is what you need to do to accomplish this training block. So it's very much a back and forth, and we text not quite every day, but we'll go through a week's period of time where we are texting several times a day, and then maybe we go 2 weeks and we don't need to communicate a lot because things are just flowing along. So I've really enjoyed it. It's very much a partnership.
Thank you. So Kirsten, why do you think the partnership has worked well? And was Suzanne your first coach?
Yes, very much so. Apart from my father, she is the only other person who has influenced my training. And I think, like she just described, it's very much a partnership. So for her to give me guidelines, but then for me to say, okay, well, this is how I feel on this day, or I woke up with a sick child this morning, so I'm obviously not going to make it to the track. I'm going to do it this day. Or I'll text her and say, Suzanne, I feel like I need to go to the track. What do I need to do? And she'll text me back a workout. But the thing that I really like about Suzanne's coaching is I like that data influences it, but it doesn't drive it. So she never tells me to go out and do a workout based strictly on heart rate or power, because she knows that's not how I function. I function on perceived effort, and she works with me on that. And we use those numbers as guidelines, but she has a lot of respect for my input on things too. And I think that's why we work so well together.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Mike Joyner, who's the head of exercise science at the Mayo Clinic, said that the best coaches of the best athletes, they are aware of data, but they never work off formulas or anything like that. It's always intuition about the athlete, being really being able to read the athlete well, and it's a very intuitive approach. So Suzanne is doing what the best coaches of the best athletes do, and apparently she is one. So let me ask you, Kirsten, let's focus on swimming a little bit more now. What's your favorite way to spend time in the pool? What's your favorite form of training?
Well, I draw a lot on total immersion, and I draw a lot on focal points and focuses and skill swimming, I guess. So every workout I try to have a goal and something that I'm focusing on, and that's really what drives it. I get a lot of guidance from Suzanne. Different workouts, she'll have different things to work on, different goals for that workout. So I think that has helped a lot in my swimming.
Yeah. Suzanne, same kind of question to you. Kirsten is, I would suppose, the best athlete that you're working with, and probably the best swimmer you're working with. So how do you treat someone like Kirsten differently compared to a more typical client?
So I think there's a couple of components to that question that to break down. Kirsten is so easy to work with because she'll either do what I ask her to do and give me great feedback, or she doesn't do what I ask her to do and she gives me great feedback. So it really goes back to and the feedback that I get from the athlete. So how do I work with Kirsten that's different? Well, you know, if people are listening to this interview and saying, I want to be more like Kirsten, how can I get faster like Kirsten? I really think it goes back to, in part, the idea of continuous improvement. The other part is Kirsten's attitude. I mean, she shares that attitude. Every time we talk about a race, she says, well, the good news is there's always another race. It really doesn't matter what goes wrong. For example, breaking your foot in T1 during an Ironman. I mean, that's pretty catastrophic, and yet Kirsten managed to deal with it. She didn't have her best time in that race, and she said, you know what, there's always another race. So what I would do that's different with Kirsten, because of her attitude, we're able to cycle through a lot of different types of training. So in the first year or two that we were working together, a lot of it was just fundamental technique, getting smooth, getting rid of the wasted energy, using swimming as, you know, partly as a recovery method for her strenuous race schedule. I don't have any
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
So I imagine people are wondering, since you're in Pittsburgh and she's in McKenzie, Tennessee, how do you work together in technique?
Well, we've made a few personal contacts. I had a mini 2.5-day training camp in McKenzie a year and a half ago, so I got to see Kirsten then. I got to see her in Florida.
Hawaii.
I'm not sure. Hawaii, yeah. I got to see her in Hawaii last year. That was wonderful. So we have these personal contacts that are, I wish they were more frequent, obviously, both for personal reasons and coaching reasons. But we use a lot of video feedback. We use a lot of verbal descriptions, you know, how did this feel? Without describing sort of the mechanical parts of it, you know, what are you sensing? The component that's missing of that is me observing her directly. She can sort of observe herself by video and then send me the video. So, you know, we managed to make it work, and I think if we had more personal time, it would be even better.
Okay. Kirsten, back to you and to that World Championship race. So, first, your expectations or hopes going in, what you thought you had to do well to place as well as you could place. I'm not saying you went in expecting to be world champion, but I'm saying to do the race as well as you could. What did you need to do well? And then how did it fold from the start?
Well, it's an interesting thing because I actually did 2 races. So I did the sprint distance world championship on the Thursday, and then I raced the standard distance on the Saturday. And my thought going in on Thursday was, I'm just going to lay it all out and give it what I have and see what's left. So I actually finished 2nd overall in that race, but Saturday was really the big race. So going into the race Saturday, I was sore from Thursday's effort, and I knew that going into the race. So I knew ideally I was already at some disadvantage compared to my competitors who had not raced on Thursday. For the swim, despite my work on it, is still not my strongest suit in the race. So for me, I'm a very good efficient swimmer. I'm very comfortable in the water, and I feel like I can save a lot of energy and use that towards my bike and run where I excel. So I knew I would not be able to hang with the fastest swimmers, but I was okay with that in the race. So I just gave it the best that I could for my swim, and I was happy with my effort. And then I knew I'd have to have a good, solid bike. And then the run, I was going to be sore going into it, so it was going to be a matter of whatever was left. So swim unfolded perfectly. I got out. It's really hard to tell where you are in the race. My group was divided into 2, so I was in the first wave. So I didn't know what kind of advantage or what kind of faster athletes were in the second wave. It becomes a very individual thing. So I just knew I had to have the best race that I could have.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on the bike. I just did my thing. I've been doing a lot of bike racing this year. I was very comfortable. A lot of those corners were very similar to a crit, so I drew on my biking experience from the year. Had a good, solid bike. I had a couple of friends come up from my biking team that surprised me Saturday morning. They were there cheering me on. I knew Suzanne in her pre-race talked to me and said, you know, draw on the support from whoever's around, from the family, from the crowd, and keep smiling. And I thought about that a lot when I was out there. And, you know, while triathlon is an individual thing, it's amazing how much difference that support has. Knowing these people who are out there cheering me along, knowing that whenever I crossed a timing mat, my friends and family back home were watching, say, all right, there she is. Okay, that's what she's doing. She needs to keep going. So I drew on that a lot. I started the run. My legs were killing me going into the run. I felt like I should be finishing a 10K and not starting one. And then I saw my friends holding up this big sign, and I was like, well, they came all this way to see me race. I'm going to give them the best race I can. So I just pushed it. I've been working a lot on my running technique through Bobby McGee's stuff this year. So I really focused on my form and technique and fast speed, and I gave it the best I could. USA Triathlon was out there, and the guys I've known Tim Ute for a long time. On the last lap, he says, Kirsten, you gotta go now. And how can you slow down when somebody tells you that? So it ended up being a great race. Of all things, the run was long, and it's a good thing I didn't know that starting it out. But it just all fell together. And even at the end, when I crossed the finish line, I still had no idea where I finished. There was a group of girls behind me. There were age groups yet to come. I just knew when I crossed that line, I had given it everything I possibly could. I felt like I raced to my full potential. And to me, regardless of where you end up placing over and all, that is a sign of a good race for me. So I was thrilled. I knew I'd had the race that I wanted to have.
I'm curious, was that one of the Olympic distance tries in which it's legal to draft on the bike?
That was not.
Okay. So, and since, you know, we talked earlier about how you rely a lot more on self-perceived exertion than on data in your training, I'm just curious, could you characterize your rate of self-perceived exertion, let's say on a 10-point scale, in the swimming compared to the bike and the run?
I would say probably the swimming was closer to an 8. I still think I have the greatest room for improvement in pushing myself on the swim. And I think I tend to hold back a little bit, maybe because I know how hard I'm going to push myself on the bike and run. And I thought about that while I was out there, too. It was probably closer to an 8, where a bike was about 9.5 and the run was just 10.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's very useful information. I think you know, a less experienced and less capable swimmer would probably want to do that closer to a 5 on the swim. But I think 8 works for you. You wouldn't have done it if you didn't already know from experience that 8 works for you. So, final question to both of you: what next?
Well, I suggested that maybe she try and accomplish world peace, and she seemed to be able to be successful in everything else she's tried so far this year. But you know, Kirsten has USA Triathlon had a press release today, and I hadn't realized it, but she's won 5 national championships this year, not just in sprint or Olympic distance, but she won the half distance national championship age group title just this past weekend. And you know, my personal pet goal for Kirsten is to get her to the World Championships in long course, which she's qualified for, and see what we can do in that field. You know, I think that a question that I didn't quite answer earlier: when did I know that Kirsten had national or World Championship potential? Well, you know, looking at her race results through the year, you know, working with me was not the first time she'd been to the national championships, but the first full year we worked together, she finished, or I believe, you know, last year she finished 4th and 7th overall in the sprint and Olympic distance. So I spent some time looking at the numbers and said, hey, there's some gaps here that I think we can make up, and that led us to really focus on the swim in a certain way. And while the swim may still be the area where she can improve the most, she's made a lot of improvements, and improving at Kirsten's level of competition, improving 30 seconds on the swim, well, that's 5 podium places. You know, she's still holding back, and she's still improved her bike and her run. So from my perspective, you know, it's a partnership, and I want to do whatever Kirsten wants to do. I would love to see how we can take her speed and competitive spirit and apply it to some races where she still has additional room to grow.
Can you just clarify what it means to be overall age group champion?
Well, so there are professionals in the sport. They're also called elites, and then there are age group participants. So an age group is anyone who is a non-professional, and a professional is someone who has met specific, very strict criteria and has applied for a specific license to race as a professional. So if you're not one of those people, you're basically an age group competitor, and the age group competitions are usually in 5-year increments, starting with the early teens, and then 30 to 34, 35 to 39. So there are awards for your 5-year age increment, and then there's an overall award. So Kirsten has been very successful within her age group for the last many years, and it's been just in the last few years that she's really started to dominate overall. And by dominate, I mean, you know, placing top 10, not just top 20.
Yeah, but placing top among all women age groupers.
Among all non-professional participants,
Right.
yes.
First finisher, regardless of age.
Yep.
Kirsten, any last words from you?
What's next?
What's next? Oh, yeah, we haven't even talked about this. I don't know if I can like spring it on Suzanne right now.
Go for it.
Among other things, I'm targeting nationals and worlds next year. I really want to do Worlds Duathlon and then the Worlds long course that Suzanne was talking about for the half Ironman distance. And then, of course, Worlds for Triathlon is in Cozumel, and it just happens to fall on my husband's birthday. So it's kind of a win-win situation there.
If we get there, maybe I'll come along.
Yeah. And so I think I will see you both next in Claremont, Florida.
I hope so.
I hope so.
For our triathlon swimming camp. And I look forward to working with you and to doing a sink swim together.
Yes.
Maybe many of them.
I'll have to stretch my arms out a little bit.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Terry. It was nice.